Morning, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting. So, item 1, apologies for absent.
Yes, Chair, we've had apologies from councillors Barry Warner, Naeem Hassan, John Leach, Zidra Noor, Roger Jones, and Councillor Howard Sykes is substituted by Councillor Angie Clark.
It's one of those days where it's probably easier mentioning how many people are here, not who are not. Thank you very much for everybody else who's attended. Item 2, Chair's announcement. First of all, I'd like to welcome Adam Clark from Stagecoach, some of the operators here, Tom Calderbank Diamond, yep, Chris Allman, D&G, Ian Humphreys from First. I've got Nigel from Go Northwest. Hi, Nigel. And then with Guillaume from Keeler-Samey. Welcome. I think, is that it? That's it. Everybody on there. So, the other thing I want to make an announcement for was we had the sad news just over a week ago now. Christine Wilde had passed away. She was a member on this committee up till 2012. I believe she was on about 10 years. So our condolences go out to her family on that. Sad news. Item 2. Some good news. Unfortunately, I'm saying good news, good and bad, because unfortunately Mohammed Karim is not here today to announce it, because I did ask him to come along, because I'm a firm believer, as most people know in this committee, where I'm a credit where credit's due kind of a fella. And he's worked a lot on a diversity within TFGM organisation. So it was proud, or I was proud, as well as others, to the fact that he'd received the accreditation for Leaders in Diversity, this is TFGM, as well as winner of Transportation Organisation of the Year 2020, again for TFGM. But that's all through his guidance and his leadership regarding members on the diversity side of things. So I think it's worth acknowledging, and hopefully we'll get him at a future date. Item 3, declarations of interest. If anybody's got them, please fill in the forms and hand them over to Gwen afterwards, please. Item 4, minutes of the GM Transport Committee, held on the 17th of January. Does anybody, can all agree those passive? Yep. Is everybody in agreement with them first? Okay. Matters arising. Angelica?
Thank you, Chair. It's with regards to the item 1020. Can I just ask when are we to expect next report, and can I just urge or ask that the report comes as soon as possible after the local and mayoral elections, please?
That's fine, no problem. Will do. Okay. Nathan?
Apologies. Page 10, item 4, Northern were going to come back to me about Hale Station looking a dog's dinner, and I've had no communication whatsoever. So I don't know how we'd chase that up. Could somebody give that a nudge for me, please? Thank you.
Officers will chase that up and copy into it, Nathan. Okay. Thank you. Anybody got anything else to raise on those minutes? No? Okay, thank you. Item 5. The GM Transport Committee Work Programme. Gwen?
Thank you, Chair. Members, the programme is before you, which is largely unchanged from last time. Please note, in relation to April, there will be, in addition, a report on bus performance update. Otherwise, it's there for members' attention.
Okay, everybody okay with that? Smashing. Thank you very much. Item 6. Transport network performance. We've got Alex who's going to take that.
Good morning. So this is December's data. I'll give you the sort of network summary performance, if that's okay. Seasonal impacts, weather, Christmas markets did have an impact on the highway network, typically 4% above average in terms of volumes. The PM peak in particular was double-digit excesses, which we would expect with people coming in to do shopping and visiting the regional centre. Clearly, that has an impact on bus services throughout that period. Metrolink I won't go into detail on because we have Danny and Guillaume doing a detailed report a bit later on, if that's okay. In terms of events, in addition to the markets and the seasonal festivities, we did have some evening football fixtures which contributed to those highway network impacts. And actually some flooding, which seems to be a bit of a theme that's continued through January and February for those who have been out today and this week. The rail report, I wish I had some highlights, but I'll go through the lowlights. December was the worst performance since the May 18 timetable change for both operators. That included significant cancellation numbers for TPE, crew availability issues, including a spike in driver sickness, train derailments, train failures, power failures, as well as the seasonal impacts of weather. So not great. I will end on a positive that since then the Sunday services dispute has been resolved, so we have seen a positive improvement in that of late. One bit of breaking news I'll hand over to Alison Chew, Head of Bus, to update you on a recent bus operator issue that's come to light very recently, and after that I'm happy to take questions back on the Transport Network report. Alison.
Thank you. Just wanted to give members a quick update about Manchester Community Transport. They've announced as an operator that they will cease to operate services in April this year. Just to give some background, the operator was acquired in 2017 by the Hackney Community Transport Group and has been supported by them since that point in terms of management and technical support. But Hackney Community Transport Group has confirmed that due to a worsening financial position, that current level of support is no longer sustainable. MCT, Manchester Community Transport, currently operate 35 contracts for TFGM. Although 21 of those are due to expire in April, they do not operate any commercial services. Therefore, the impacts are limited as TFGM will seek to manage the transition of their remaining contracts to other operators. We are meeting as officers, the local managing director on Monday to discuss the matter in more detail and get a full understanding of the impacts on staff, and also then so a re-tendering exercise can commence.
Okay, has any member got any questions they want to ask? Yes?
A question for Alison about MCT. If those services are being re-tendered, are they going to be re-tendered in the current form, or are you going to take the opportunity to redesign them?
We will take a review, as we do always do when we're looking at tendered services. So we will update members as that review progresses.
Okay, I've got Warren.
Thanks, Chair. TFGM officers did a fantastic job when first bus pulled out of Ashton-under-Lyne, and of course MCT were some of the routes were transitioned to them because of that. I'm just hoping that the same job will be done to transition MCT routes to some other operators. But can you inform the members who are going to be involved? You should know it geographically, who they are, and what transition arrangements will be made.
Absolutely, we'll do that.
Okay, I've got Phil.
It's similar to Warren's, to make sure that we put emergency measures in place to provide these bus services until the tenders are actually hopefully resolved.
Okay, Angie.
Again, similar. Last year in Romilly and Woodley, we lost the 380 and 381 services, which were replaced with the 382, which, whilst is, generally it's okay, doesn't visit all the places the previous services used. So it is very, very important that we save this bus service.
Okay, I've got Steve.
Thank you, Chair. It's a separate item, so I don't know whether you want to finish on that one first, on MCT first or not.
Yep.
Right, thank you, Chair. Yeah, it's actually on page 27, 3.14, concerning the scheduled removal of the pacer trains from Greater Manchester services and so forth, which I'm sure we'd all agree with. But I did see very recently on the regional news an item relating to their maintenance, which sort of suggested that the...
I apologise, Chair. I don't know what happened then. It's a gremlin in the machine.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, just to continue then. Yeah, the item on the regional news sort of suggesting that the new trains that are replacing the pace actually need more maintenance than the old paces. So I'm not clear if somebody could actually clarify it. There was a sort of supposedly a quote from a company, but it wasn't exactly clear exactly what the problems were. But it suggested they were working on them. So any information would be really helpful. Thank you.
I'll take that away and ask the rail team to look at that specifically and get back to you.
Okay, anybody got anything else? No? Okay, thank you very much. Item 7, a better deal for bus users. I've got Alison.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides some detail following a recent announcement by government of some funding opportunities to support bus services. It was a late item to this committee being submitted due to that announcement only being made on the 6th of February, and it was considered by the Combined Authority last week as a matter of urgent business. As this committee oversees the subsidised budget for bus services, to which this is linked, a further report has been brought to this meeting. The funding that's been announced is divided into 4 work streams. The first of them is a £30 million revenue funding pot for the financial year 2020 to 21, of which GMCA has been allocated £1.59 million, subject to completing a statement of intent to government in the coming weeks on how that money is proposed to be spent. The other 3 funding opportunities are the All-Electric Bus Town Fund, which is a £50 million pot, the Super Bus Networks Fund up to £70 million, and the Rural Mobility Fund up to £20 million. And detail on all of those is provided in section 3 of the report. Specifically in relation to the All-Electric Bus Town, the Super Bus Networks and the Rural Mobility Fund, work is ongoing to consider whether Greater Manchester will bid for those for funding from those pots, and we'll keep the committee updated as that progresses. Section 4 of the report does specifically outline the proposed approach for Greater Manchester for the statement of intent for the £1.59 million of revenue funding, for which the deadlines are more pressing. The approach includes the use of some weighted assessment criteria to consider interventions, with the highest priority being given to services which have the potential to be commercially sustainable after the funding period. That's particularly important given that the funding is only short term. The other categories of criteria are strategic fit, social inclusion and alignment with network planning principles. Specific engagement is required with local MPs, and this is included as part of the programme of work. It's important to note that there will be a limit to the scope and scale of the interventions which can be delivered. Examples could include additional journeys, for example, on already established routes, extensions to different locations or enhanced weekend services. So we're asking the committee to note the intention to submit a statement of intent and our approach to developing this, and delegation was granted from the Combined Authority last week to the Chief Executive in consultation with the Mayor, the portfolio holder for finance and the Chair of this committee to submit that statement. Happy to take any questions.
Has anybody got any questions? Nathan?
I'm just picking up on this Superbus network to encourage people onto the buses. So we've got, we obviously want people in deprived areas to use the buses. I accept that. But could that not be extended to places where we actually want people on the buses? I.e. people drive from A to B a lot and there isn't a bus service. But actually if we could encourage them, could that be extended to that, or is it just for deprived areas? Because we could use that as part of the clean air process. If we could get people, let's say, I'll talk about my area, from Altrincham to Manchester, where they drive normally. If we can encourage them, given a 4-year pilot, in some way, sweeten that up and get them to stop driving, we achieve 2 things there. Could that be extended, the Superbus network, to that? And might that get more people actually on the buses because they need to go from A to B? That's not to look after deprived areas, but actually, is it not about getting people on the buses?
We'll certainly take that away and look at that. There is an emphasis on areas of deprivation stressed in the guidance, but we will certainly have a look at that.
Okay, Sean?
Yeah, at the last meeting, and I know running up to it, there was a lot of discussion about the X41 service, which connected Ramsbottom to Manchester, but of course it runs on into Lancashire beyond Ramsbottom. Now, following that meeting, there was, following our Transport Committee meeting, there was a meeting with local politicians and officers and relevant people to try and save that service. And then it was subsequently saved. And according to the MEN, on the 22nd of January, it says, "It is understood that the government has stepped in to help fund the service following pressure from newly elected MPs." Now, that sounds like central government has provided a subsidy for a local bus service here in Greater Manchester. There are members around this table that represent boroughs that have had significant cuts in bus services in all of their areas and have never, to my knowledge, received any central government funding for intervention to reinstate a service. So my question is, what is the criteria for central government intervention for local bus services in Greater Manchester? Whilst I don't begrudge the people of Ramsbottom that express service, if I were being cynical, I would say that it seems to be based on the colour of the rosette of the successful candidate in December's general election in that area.
As I'm aware, Sean, and I could be stand corrected, but I don't think any officer from TFGM's been involved with this. So it's dealing direct with the operator themselves, I believe.
Perhaps
so maybe who's the operator involved?
Yeah, the operator's Transdev. They're not here today, but certainly no, we didn't have any involvement in that as officers at TFGM.
Okay, well, perhaps it's just an observation that I'm grateful I could make in public.
And it is a wise observation, because it's worrying times, especially when, you know, I consider when I took over originally as the chair of the bus network point of view, we have 37 million on subsidised bus services, and now we've got 27 million. So what they're saying is they're going to cut it locally, but give it nationally. Well, I think that's the wrong way about bringing power back to the people locally, where we want them. Okay, but I'll swiftly move on from that. Anybody else got any comments on this? No? Okay. So moving to item 8, changes of the bus network and review of subsidised bus services. We've got Alison and
James
isn't it?
Lead this one.
Cheers, James.
Thank you, Chair. To keep things brief, if you're in agreement, we'll go through the 3 annexes. I don't believe there's anything in Annex B today. So, with regard to the content of Annex A, I'll be very pleased to take any questions.
Anybody got any questions in Annex A? Doreen?
The 375 service is, I think, been very controversial. It's not my area at all. But listening to politicians and different people, I'm wondering if it's possible to move... what?
Is it on this appendix? Appendix A.
Is this Appendix A? Yes. Yes.
It's on C.
It's on C?
It's on C.
Oh, so I won't say it. Right, okay.
Anybody got any questions on Appendix A? No. Okay. With nothing on Appendix B. So have you got something to mention now, James, on Appendix C?
Thank you, Chair. I can't imagine what you're referring to. There are a number of items in Annex C. These are, of course, the services with support from TFGM. And we'd obviously welcome any questions on the items within there today.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, this is on the 375 service. Obviously, it's aroused a huge strength of feeling, this. I know there have been various petitions done by local members, and the local MP for the area has done something as well. And I appreciate there's the proposal for the local link. That's obviously better than having nothing. But there are obviously issues with going for a local link in terms of, you know, the concessionary bus pass doesn't necessarily apply to this, and there's the issue as well in terms of, you know, people who are particularly proud and want to just, you know, use the current bus service just to go a short way will have to obviously phone for a service to take them maybe just 400 odd metres down the road. And obviously there's a concern as well that those who, particularly during the day, who are commuting to local schools and so on, you know, obviously rely on the service in order to sort of get to where they need to be. I mean, for me, this shows really why we need bus reform within Greater Manchester. Manchester, it shows again that we just can't keep relying on a dwindling subsidy year on year to try and prop up services, when really, you know, services should be run for the benefit of local people. So the question that I've got really is that if we can't pause this and look at it again in terms of remodelling the current service, can a bid be made, as we touched on before, in relation to the better deal for buses? Can we make a bid to look at some money, to look at the 375? And I guess also as well, I'll apply also to the 130, which has been cut in my ward as well. And also questions have been asked whether this money could even be used to reignite the Stockport Metrolink shuttle as well. So really my question is, can we use some of that money that we're now going to look to be getting to put that into the 375 in order to continue it running in its current form? Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Mellor, for your comments. What we'll do as part of the process around the better deal for bus users, we'll look at the variety of different representations that are made and assess those against the criteria outlined in the previous report, and we'll report back on those findings.
I've got Doreen first. Sorry about that, I didn't realise.
On the 375 service, I mean, it's not my area, so I can't comment on it, but I have had a lot of representations for people. And I'd like to move postponement, and I mean, somebody's just said about the better bus deal, to see if there is any way that this can be funded without just deciding today.
I'm just going to bring Angie in first, because I know she wants to say something. So if you want, I've got the petition, yes. If you want to just turn your mic off, Doreen.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I've got quite a lot to say about the 375 because it does touch onto my ward, and we've got two councillors from both Marple wards here to support this, how strongly they feel about it. You were talking, Alison, about the Rural Mobility Fund. Well, the area that this bus route covers is one of the most rural in Greater Manchester, and the demographic up there is fairly elderly. And because of that, the local link isn't really going to help, because in the real world, I've had various people say to me they have to book the local link maybe 2 or 3 days in advance because the service is absolutely oversubscribed. It's not like booking an Uber or something like that. They have to plan days in advance. And also there is the cost issue. Now this service goes right up to the top of Mellor, and it goes down to Stockport via Stepping Hill Hospital. We've been approached by people who work at the hospital who have appointments at Stepping Hill, which has massive parking problems. So even if these people could drive there, parking is so difficult. It's a very contentious issue. So it's a really important part of this route, and it does link the whole of Marple to Stepping Hill and is very well used. We've also been contacted by people in the Hawk Green section. They use it. Hawk Green's what, 1.5 miles out of Marple, but people do use it to go into Marple, where the main shops are, to do their shopping. We're concerned that cutting this service contravenes the 2017 Transport Act, because before cutting a service, you're not just having to look at the economic arguments, you're having to look at the social arguments as well. And that brings me to the bus franchise system. I think we're all in support of it because its ethos is providing a social service for the public. And to cut a service like this would go against it. And it's very ironic that in the recent weeks, Andy Burnham went to Marple, talked about improving public transport services from the Marple area, and then we hear that this service is going to be cut. And we don't know if he knew about it at the time, but it's going to be very difficult to persuade people living in areas like Marple, Hawk Green. Means nothing, well, Mellor and Hawk Green probably means nothing to all of you here, but they are important areas of the ward, to get behind a franchise system as they see a service like this being cut. And what we're asking for is a deferment till next January, whilst it's looked at properly, because we are worried that if this service is cut now, when the bus franchise system comes into play, it won't be there, so nothing has to be done about it. We want it still to be there, then it has to be considered. It's very, very important. I think that's everything I had to say about it. I did have quite a list. Oh, Yeah, another thing is there are rural businesses. There's a couple of award-winning pubs, for instance, up at the top end of Mellor, and people do get the bus to it because it's a 3 or 4 mile drive out from where most customers live. And these days people do try and use the bus because they don't want to drink and drive, and it's very convenient for them. These small businesses rely on people getting there by bus, and they're going to really suffer, and particularly in the run-up to Christmas. There's also the leisure aspect, if you like. I don't think we promote services like this enough to people from places like Stockport, that they can jump on a bus and find themselves in the Peak District, because that's where the service finishes. And we should be promoting it more. We're trying to get people more active and out there. And if there was this hourly bus service that they know that they can get up there and get back, they're more likely to use it. Oh yes, in capital letters, I've got my petition. I'm not trying to play petition one-upmanship, but ours is in a box. This is only since Monday. We've had 1,700 signatures. I've heard this morning it's gone up to nearly 2,000. Now we know that not everybody that signs it gets the bus, but it's an example of how strongly people around the Marple and Romley area feel about this service and how it serves the public.
Okay, now, I've noticed you're indicating one, and is it on this subject before I move on to what Doreen's?
Yes, Chair, it is. Normal rules of chairmanship would dictate that a motion on the floor would be the sole topic of conversation, but some of this information is in Part B, and it's commercially sensitive, and I wouldn't want to embarrass Stagecoach by discussing their commercial arrangements with TFGM. I'm just wondering whether we could put that motion in Part B and not in Part A.
Let me just seek some advice.
If you want a discussion in private, so that you can consider the financial aspects too, you could do that, and then you could reconvene if you wanted to make your decision in public, if that would be an acceptable solution.
I'd rather go to the vote first, and then if those decisions can be spoken to in Part B afterwards when we're mentioning actual money point of view.
I didn't move postponement on the money issue. It was on the service itself to be looked at, because, as Councillor Clark said, it is so important to those people.
Okay, so
talk of postponement, and there's others wanting to make a decision. I'm really confused on this, because the evidence given, and I'm not talking about money, but it's very little used. But we've had all these people going to hospital, outpatients, and visiting people who are in hospital, people going shopping. And I just wonder, if there was a postponement, whether we could have another survey. We have them regularly on buses around our way, which are well used, but asking exactly where you're going, and you feel it's interfering in your personal life sometimes. But they do have a detailed survey, more than just the numbers who use it, but why and where they're going. So I'm only supporting, in a way, the postponement, because on the numbers we're given and what we read in the Manchester Evening News this morning, it's not many. But the evidence being given is that a lot of people use it for very important reasons. So I would say, if it's postponed, perhaps we could have another detailed survey by GM or the company who run it. Thank you.
okay, so I've got Councillor Dickinson that's put a proposal forward. I'm also going to put a proposal forward in basically moving the recommendations as it's stated inside the minutes. Because of the fact that we've got Local Link as a supportive of that recommendation for now, we definitely need to take up David's point of view of seeing making sure that officers, as part of that proposal, is going to take to the better deal for bus users. And if you can make sure officers, if everybody agrees with my proposal or my recommendation of staying the same. I think I just want to point out I mean, I know there's a lot of new members this year on the committee, but as I pointed out earlier, from 37 million in subsidised bus services down to 27 million that's been cut by central government over the last few years, it's put us in this dilemma where we've had to draw a line in the sand at some point to say that if that cost per passenger is going over that amount, then I'm sorry, but we have to make that difficult decision of we can't carry on with that. Now, I just wrote a few things down on over the last few months' point of view. So Service 594, for instance, Wigan, Leigh, my area, in fact, we didn't support that in any way because it was over that threshold. And can I say that that's nearly half the price of what's been quoted for this service? We've got Service 387, Tameside. Again, we made that difficult decision and not been able to support it because of the fact that we haven't got the funding to do so. Again, nearly half price, less than this service. So even though I do appreciate, and I think we should use the opportunity to take that forward with the officers of what David's point of view is, I can fully understand. I've brought petitions in myself for my own services. I really can, because I feel for those people. But we definitely, this is exactly why we need franchising and being able to decide where we want to send buses, where we know our passengers need them. Okay, so we've got two choices there, and I'm going to put it to the vote. Okay, so if anybody who's in favour of Doreen's point of view of, in effect, pushing it over to be looked at to the next meeting, then please put their hands up now. Okay? You clock those. Anybody who's in favour of my proposal and recommendation that I put forward, please show your hands now. Yeah, well, we'll take that separately. I know yours were on a different issue. I'll bring you in a minute. This is just particularly on this service. Okay? So my proposal will go forward in that. And I can only apologise to people on that, but we'll make sure that we'll follow that up to make sure that MPs look at it. Thank you very much. So, bringing it back to other minutes, I've got Stuart.
Thank you. It's about the Bolton Combined Local Link. The important thing about this local link is that 42% of the journeys are made for employment reasons, most of which are people working at the Royal Bolton Hospital. It does say that and 26% of the people who use this service are over 2 kilometres away from an established bus route. I know you can't see it, but there's a huge rural area up here, and we were offered this local link after the withdrawal of the 273, and it is actually my own ward. But I've had a lot of correspondence this week about it, particularly from nurses and doctors at the nurses and other staff at the Bolton Royal Hospital who do work awkward shifts, and it would be, this particular lady has a 25-minute walk to one bus stop, then has to change buses, and Diamond buses unfortunately have not been very reliable, so this is why the local link is there, and this is a very critical importance. Now, I also want to mention about some operational matters. Now, yesterday I went into the Bolton, our new fantastic, which it is fantastic, our new interchange, and I went to the information office and I asked her about could I have the leaflets on the local link? So she then came, she said, I don't know. I'm not criticising this member of staff. She was absolutely very helpful and in every way. But then she said, we don't have any leaflets now. We've not had any leaflets for months. He said, well, how do I access the local link? oh, I don't know. And so I then was given a telephone number to phone up. So if that's the sort of engagement, it is not it's not surprising that the number of usages has gone down by 12% in the last 12 months. The other matter is that, and I don't know whether this is anecdotal, but additional information, my local link driver has just informed me a lady who was a nurse and lives in Somerton Road tried to book a return journey for 3:30 on the 18th of February from Bolton Hospital back to Somerton Road. She was told by the local link officer there's nothing available till 4:30. However, the driver on this route said he was available from 2:45 till a 4:30 job that was booked in from the hospital. Therefore, it does seem a lack of communication may indeed be the reason for numbers being low. I know it's a very high social cost per journey, but what I would like here is a postponement so we can consider the method of taking on account operational matters and other matters which could make this service, this function, which is very well needed. Like I say, 42% of journeys, of the overall journeys for employment purposes at the hospital, and admittedly they say there's 50% of the overall journeys which aren't for over 70s who would be accessible to the ring and ride. So that means it's something like 84% of journeys are for people working at the hospital. And I do think this is an exceptional case which needs to be discussed, and obviously ways that we can possibly reduce the overall cost. Speaking to people who use this service, most of them would have no objection to an increase in the charge for the service. But I mean, they can't be affording a minimum of £8 taxi fares to go accessing local jobs. Thank you.
I want to bring you back in on some of those issues where he's raised.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Haslam, for your comments. Just in terms of the operation of the local link, our recommendation to withdraw is based on the sort of low usage that we are seeing and the significant cost per passenger that does result in, which we spoke about yesterday. In terms of the information at the interchange, we are looking into that as a matter of urgency. We believe it's possibly been an oversight since the interchange actually moved into its new location. But what I can confirm is that we have been promoting the local link through sort of direct engagement within communities and also through our website and social media channels. We have been seeking to ensure that people are aware of its existence and you know, of the information in terms of booking and using it. Unfortunately, given, as I say, the usage and the price to keep that contract in place, it really isn't a recommendation that we can make, given that significant cost per passenger.
Chair, no offence to David, but David, this is casework. It may be an idea to speak to officers directly after the meeting or email the officers directly with your concerns, because we're here today to listen to issues across all the different boroughs and not to listen to casework.
No, you don't have to answer that, Stuart. I know it's a point raised. You've raised it on here, and I'm just going to take that point of view forward. Does anybody else support Stuart on, you know, again, I have a little bit of difficulty. I'm sympathetic towards it, of course I am, but again, this is double the value of what I previously commented on, you know, for other areas, including the 375, and that is the problem there, Stuart, to be honest with you. So Stuart's asked to postpone it to the next meeting. Does anybody else want to support Stuart's? Okay, so just two. I'm going to take it as everybody else. Is everybody else happy with us taking it forward as the recommended on here? Can we? Everybody else agree on that? Can you show your hands, please, if you agree with it? Okay. Okay, point made, Stuart. Thank you very much. Item, has anybody got any more comments on those? Thanks for that then, James. Item 9, Metrolink performance update. We've got Danny.
Thanks, Chair. So, quite a detailed report. Obviously, there's a lot goes on across the full Metrolink business. So essentially, since the new format meetings, this is the second version. So what we're doing is putting a rolling 12-month look back, if you like, every 3 months. So focusing on the most recent quarter. That takes us up to essentially the beginning of January with this one. So it's the last couple of months of 2019, but essentially it gives you a look back on the whole calendar year 2019. So a couple of things probably just more recent that aren't in the report, just to mention, I suppose. So the biggest thing is just last week we accepted from the contractor the Trafford Park line into operations and maintenance to facilitate driver training. So that started in earnest this week, which is a really good thing. So Trafford Park line, it's looking quite well. The infrastructure is fairly robust. It's probably been the best one we've done actually over the last 10 years. So we've continuously learned from previous projects. We also, although there's probably a separate presentation later, we launched this week an early bird style product following trials last year. So it's the first week. It's probably too early to have some meaningful analysis, but anecdotal evidence suggests people are actually taking us up on that and shifting a little bit earlier. And so, which brings me on to, I guess, the period then that we're reporting. So, as the performance indicators and so on show throughout this, it was a pretty challenging few months. And the positive news, we are still growing patronage, which is great. So we're at 45.5 million trips. But really, we fell short of some of our targets in terms of punctuality and reliability. The main issues contributing to that were, there's a big theme about road traffic collisions actually, which had contributed to a problem of tram availability. There were some repeat signalling issues at Victoria, which were very frustrating, since been resolved, but it took us a while to get to the bottom of those. And there was a system-wide communications network failure, which actually affected us for half an hour across the whole network. Half an hour doesn't seem like a lot, but actually when we're running the amount of trams that we do, that's affecting quite a lot of passengers. And that impact goes through onto all of the KPIs that you can see. Really, they were the main things in the period. We have, this time around, following a request from the committee last time, included in an appendix a sort of a line-by-line summary, so members can see how Metrolink's performed in their areas more specifically. I won't go into too much detail on that one. And that's really all I wanted to say, and then I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, Phil?
Danny, thanks for the report. It's quite interesting. But what we hear from our constituents in Rochdale, again, we raise the issue of antisocial behaviour. While the staff are working hard to try and reduce it and make people feel safe, questions are being raised in relation to the travel safe unit, the policing unit. Who are they? Is this an invisible team that travel up and down the tram network or the bus network? Because no one seems to see them. You get a couple of incidents, what you report, and all glorifying what they do, a couple of incidents, yet the people who need them on the network never see them. We've got serious issues on the Rochdale and Oldham line. As you know, the Blackpool comes to Manchester Fair came to Hollingwood last week. Where were the travel safe police then when they needed to be there to combat antisocial behaviour on the line? In relation to an issue I'd raised last month, because our constituents travel into the city centre via Newton Heath, Moston, Hollingwood, Newton Heath, Monsell, Piccadilly, New Islington. What action have you taken to combat this aggressive type of begging on and off the trams and on the platform? Someone is seriously going to get hurt with these undesirable people travelling for free, intimidating people, and we need to curb this before it gets out of hand.
I take that point on board, Phil. I'm a little bit surprised because quite a lot of the feedback we've had has been positive actually about the new transport unit and how that's been performing. Some of the KPIs we see. So probably by the next time we report here, you'll see some of the antisocial behaviour stats come down.
Danny, the only time you see the police if they're going on a meal break to Central Park and back.
Okay, well, I won't comment on that directly. No,
yeah, let's not get into it.
Yeah, but genuinely the feedback has been good.
I
I was told this morning that the tactical priority for that unit over the next planning cycle is Bury and is Oldham and Rochdale. So I hope that improves. But I'll take your feedback on board. I'll bring that back to the team in TFGM and see what we can do, Phil.
Okay, can you just make sure you just relay direct with Phil as well, inside. I've now got Joanne.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question, and it's point 214. With the Trafford Centre line due to open in April 2020, will there be an increase in CSRs? And if so, do we know how many?
I might defer to my colleague here, Guillaume. I should have introduced. Sorry, Guillaume is the new managing director for Keolis Amy.
Thank you, Danny. Yes, we'll have a new team who are also working on reorganizing the way we deal with security and customer support on the service. We will work in partnership with TFGM on finding the right level of resources to make sure we stay at the same level of service or better in the future. Yeah.
Okay, I've got Warren.
Thanks, Chair. Page 58, 2.7, a system-wide network control failure. I can understand vehicle collisions causing problems and all the rest of it, because those are accidents and they happen. But here you've got part of the system failure that the whole network went down, luckily for only 30 minutes. It could have been a lot longer. But what I don't sense in that paragraph is any urgency or any report back to this committee what you are doing about it and when will it be fixed by. It says that the core network control infrastructure needs renewing or replacing, I should imagine. But you've not given us any dates or any sort of we're doing it immediately, or is it, you know, it could be, oh, we'll do it next week sometime.
Thanks, Councillor Bray. I probably should have done, because I could have done. So that project, we have gone to the market. We've undertaken a procurement exercise, and we have the bids back in only in the last couple of weeks. So that the renewal of the whole of the fibre optic network will be taking place throughout this year. It's a big job because we've got 100 kilometres of network, quite a lot of old legacy fibre optic network in the ground. We have though taken lots of actions to improve the resilience, the redundancy. We've repaired a hell of a lot of fibre over the course of the last year, actually, even prior to this, but since that particular incident, and I'm pretty confident in the stability of that network. That was the first failure in 27 months, so over 2 years we hadn't had a failure with that system. I think it's reliable now. It will be renewed throughout the course of this year is the answer to that question, I think. I think once we award a contract, I think that the work will take place over the course of about a year.
Okay. Matt?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It was just, maybe could have come in a bit early, but it's just in relation to the transport unit and their work. I mean, I know they're only 3 months in, and the transport unit was long overdue to have officers who have arrest powers to actually police nearly 1 million people in the transport network that goes with it. I follow them on social media, the transport unit, and they seem to be doing a lot of good work, but I think for elected members there seems to be a lot of confusion about how they work operationally and what their relationship is with local neighbourhood police units and also the British Transport Police. I'm sure they are doing a lot of good work, and I do see the stuff on social media, but how do they work with the local police? Are they on a different radio channel? Do they send each other emails? I think it would be really useful for maybe a supervisor from that unit to bring a report, or maybe speak in person at a future committee meeting, because I'm really interested to know how they work. Because I mean, I've done research on how different transport unit works in New York, in Amsterdam, in different, I mean, this really needed to happen, and we need to make it the best success we can. But so I'd just like to recommend that maybe a supervisor or inspector from the transport unit can come in and let us know how they're getting on 3 months in, because it is really important.
Maybe just before you say that, though, before you say it, obviously I've asked for Travel Safe to come back to this meeting as well on the update, etc. So it'd be good, before we do the Travel Safe Week point of view, where if we can get that information out at the same time, they can link it directly in contact.
So my understanding is, I think it's Inspector Nick Bailey, who heads up that unit, is coming back next month, so into the March meeting. So that should answer that question. Yeah.
Cheers, Danny. Okay, I've got Doreen. Roy?
Thank you, Chairman. It's just a quick one. You mentioned Trafford Centre line from Crumpsall opening sooner than expected. And obviously, without being too parochial for Councillor Burke, we welcome this in Bury, that we're going to get this service to the Trafford Centre. But what does strike me, it'll go through Cornbrook. Now, I read somewhere recently this was the busiest point of any rail or tram service in Europe. And having recently had to get on and off there, changing trams, so to get a seat at Victoria coming back from the East Didsbury line, they're every minute. Now, I haven't got an answer for this, because we want the trams to go to Altrincham and the airport and East Didsbury and Media City and Eccles and so on, and now the Trafford Centre. But it can't sustain any more, because I say at peak times they're literally standing waiting to the next one to come in, and the next one's there coming in, they're every minute. So it is very busy from Cornbrook to St Peter's Square, where we have now got a second crossing through Exchange Square. Are there any plans long term? I'm not asking for it to be sorted this morning, because I think it's something we're going to have to think about structurally, how we get round this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Walker. That's our biggest challenge, I've got to say. So that's the thing that we're focused on most. So it is, you're right, I think it was probably me who wrote that down. It is the busiest stretch, certainly of light rail. And I've yet to find somebody who will challenge me on that anywhere in the world. So when we do open the Trafford line, it will initially terminate at Cornbrook actually and turn around, so it will be brought to Crumpsall later in the year when we have some new trams arrive. So part of the problem that you're outlining is one of capacity, and so in response to that we have an order of 27 trams from Bombardier, the same trams coming. They'll start to arrive later this year, and we'll be putting them straight out on the network. They will help capacity issues, but it is a challenge to keep that number of vehicles going through there, and I think with the Trafford Centre, with the Trafford Park line opening, that really is us maxed out for capacity, and we do need to think longer term, and we are doing so. So I think as part of our 2040 strategy, there are several options in there to look at how we deal with providing that capacity, and that might be longer vehicles, that might be completely alternative routes, in fact, for Metrolink. So there's lots of things in the mix.
Orbital route.
Yeah. So, or indeed, a third city crossing maybe, or even in the very far future, going underground with a metro type system.
New platform and line into Crumpsall, which I'm sure we were told was for Trafford Centre, and you could change there to go to the Trafford Centre. So how long before that does come in to be of use, or have we just wasted a lot of money? Somebody wasted money.
It's never a waste of money to upgrade a passenger facility, it is for the Trafford line. That will ultimately be where the trams from Trafford Centre terminate. That will give an average of 4-minute service to people from that area. It's
probably good practice. We've done it in the past to when we open the airport line, for example, to not open the full line. We establish the sort of patronage, and even still, Cornbrook gives opportunities. Only one interchange from almost anywhere on the network, but essentially once we have that bedding in period and we've put the infrastructure through its paces, and we have some new vehicles, it'll be later this year, probably around October or November.
Thank you.
Okay, just on that, I might have missed it, but Guillaume, have we got enough? I've mentioned about whether we've got enough transport system actually to cover the Trafford line when it's opening, but have we got enough staff as well?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, we have worked to recruit the right number of drivers, also to look into the customer service side. So yes, we will be ready, and we are committed for starting an excellent service.
Sean?
It's in relation to 5.2 about the opening of the Trafford Park line in April, and also 5.9 about the new trams. So my understanding is that some trams that will service the Trafford Park line are currently in use elsewhere on the network to increase capacity. So it sounds like if the Trafford Park line is opening in April, but the new trams are not beginning to arrive until the summer, there is going to be a reduction in capacity elsewhere on the network for at least a short period. How long do you, is that true? Have I understood that correctly? And how long do you anticipate that there will be a reduction in capacity elsewhere on the network, and will it be concentrated on any of the particular lines?
No, we're not reducing capacity anywhere else on the network. That may have been the case had we opened to Crumpsall. So that's part of our decision-making process to open to Cornbrook, because we don't want to take away any capacity anywhere else on the network. We've probably over-provided in terms of the number of doubles we run, Altrincham, Bury East, Didsbury services, for example. But to provide those, we've used the available trams that we had actually purchased for the Trafford Park line, if you like. So with another order of vehicles in the bag, as it were, we released those into service to help passengers on a daily basis today. So we know we can do the extension. When we do get some of those new trams, we can extend as far as Crumpsall. So in other words, no capacity impact. Now that's going to be a challenge. So for example, today we're doing driver training. We've got 3 trams operating that line. It'll take 5 to run the service. My biggest worry at the moment is the number of road traffic collisions that we still have that keeps trams out of service. I think somewhere in the report I've said it's an average of about 3 or 4 out of service. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that when we do have accidents and incidents, we can fix trams as quickly as possible. I know Guillaume, it's a big focus of his attention, so maybe if you'd like to add anything to that.
Yes, on the point 1.4, the report mentions that we need 103 trams out of 120 to operate. We have deployed new techniques and new way of working to be sure we can operate at 108 availability to absorb the change in needs. And I can report here that we are running at this rate regularly now to make sure we'll be able to deliver this performance right at the start of the TPL line opening.
So in short, we're not reducing any capacity anywhere. Today we run 103 in the peak. When Trafford Park line opens, we'll be running 108 from 120 vehicles. It makes it more challenging, and we need to keep up levels of good performance to do that. So we're not reducing capacity.
Okay, I've got Doreen.
On the corporate social responsibility, reading the report, I do think CAMS and Metrolink need congratulating. We can all say companies can do better, but reading this report, they've done excellent to me. To have 28 new apprentices is wonderful, and they're procuring within a 25-mile radius of Manchester. I think it's great. Thank you.
Echo those comments. I've got Phil.
Thanks, Chair. Just 2 quick questions, Danny. Are you still reviewing the decision to run Rochdale trams to Piccadilly? I did ask a few months ago. And also, on a lighter note, when can we expect the tram to Middleton?
I think I have to read the MEN to find out where the next Metrolink extension is going to come these days. So I don't know if it's Middleton, but it's in the mix. It is one that we're looking at, Phil. What we are looking at, actually, interestingly, is HS2, and when it comes to Manchester, I hope it's a when, actually, but that will require quite extensive remodelling of Piccadilly. It will have a big impact on us, but it's an opportunity to look at Piccadilly and how that operates, and actually will give us the capacity to possibly run more services. So it'll be 4 platform faces rather than 2, and then we can inject more capacity. So we could look at that. Yeah.
Okay, I've got one more, Matt.
Yeah, just a quick one while we're still on the topic of trams. I'm not sure if it's been answered, but how are these 27 going to be distributed? I know the Trafford Park line's been mentioned, but on the East Didsbury line at peak services, by the time you get to West Didsbury, 3 stops in, you're standing. So I'm quite interested to know how these will be distributed across the network.
They're going to be, so we kind of have to wait and see a little bit. The Trafford Park line is going to add a lot of demand on the network, and it'll change the profile of where people travel from and to. One of the things the Trafford Park line will do will probably carry a lot of people who currently travel on the Eccles line, for example, to Media City. And so that should alleviate some of the pressure that we have on the Eccles line. So Eccles line is one of those lines that when I look at it now, it's very, very, very busy. But most of our lines are and growing. But in short, we'll be putting those trams where the busiest demand is. So currently, in order, that's Altrincham, Bury, East Didsbury, Eccles. So we'll be spreading them about and trying to target those doubles as well in the peak of the peak, if you like, when most people travel. We introduced an early bird ticketing product, which gives sort of discounted travel for those travelling earlier. One of the positive effects we hope that has is to encourage people to spread out those peak times, if you like. So we need to monitor the impact of that as well, and then basically we'll target those new vehicles where they are most needed.
Can I just come back on that very quickly? Just a quick question. I mean, when the new models were ordered, I think in 2012, how come they weren't doubled up in the first place? Was it because we didn't anticipate the demand, or because we didn't have the money to buy them all as doubles? Just out of interest.
There's probably a book in that somewhere, actually. No, when the new trams were bought, I think the initial order was only for a handful, because we thought we could live with the old T68 30-metre units. Those trams are 30 metres long. They're designed primarily around our infrastructure constraints. So we have to specify vehicles on what our infrastructure is. So the T68s were 30-metre vehicles, the old trams, and that was kind of brought through. But they were designed then to be able to couple together to make double units, I guess. We never anticipated back then having to do as much as we do now. And I think it's just a sign of a growing patronage. I think it's been a story of Greater Manchester, actually a good story. And I'm not saying it's Metrolink's fault, but we've seen a lot more development and so on, which is a good thing for this region, I guess. And yeah, we probably didn't anticipate. Hindsight's a wonderful thing. We probably would have bought 60-metre vehicles at the time if we had known, and had the money too.
Okay, I'm going to take Steve and I'm going to move on. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. In relation to the number of trams capacity, obviously we touched on the capacity quite a bit, but it's actually, my concern is actually, once you've ordered all these extra trams and the extra routes, how much account have you taken in terms of yes, ones that are off the road for accidents, but also general maintenance, because it's actually must put a lot more pressure on those elements of it all, and particularly if a couple that are suddenly taken out with an incident, then obviously the ones that are in for schedule. Have you built those line actually into the overall strategy? Because I can see that you're stretching almost to the limits by looks of it. So I'm just concerned, obviously, that on a day-to-day basis, while things will work normally and you're at capacity, but if something happens, have you got some resilience built into it?
It's I guess infrastructure is designed to be fairly robust. There's nothing particularly new and novel, and the teams are well used to dealing with issues on the infrastructure side. Running a lot more miles does mean a lot more maintenance, but that's looked at in terms of resourcing of staff, for example, in the depots. And we are actually still investing more in depots and having additional stabling areas and so on. So we still have a lot of projects on the go to continuously improve, if you know what I mean. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 10. Metrolink ticketing. I've got Stephen.
I can sit down if you like, otherwise I was thinking we'd stand up. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Sit down. Okay, right, fine. First of all, perhaps just to say why we're here, this is part of the work plan that we'd set out to help with the committee during the year, particularly around Metrolink ticketing, and it's, I think, apt to follow the report that we've just done, because most of what we're here to talk about is Metrolink based. However, ticketing is one of those really key integration things where we need to think and do think about it in a cross-modal way. But I think some of the things we're here to talk about, and it's a particularly exciting time and has been for perhaps the last year or so in a ticketing sense for Metrolink. There's lots and lots happening, and what we'd like to just talk through with a relatively short number of slides with you and then take some questions is really what we've been trying to do and why, what we're going on to be doing as well. And as I say, to take comments, questions and feedback would be really useful for us at this point. So just to start off, we could come at this, I guess, from a number of different ways in terms of, well, why are these things important about ticketing? And obviously, as elected members, these are things I think that you'll recognise as really important words. They look a little bit like buzzwords. They're not. They're actually linked back to our 2040 strategy, for example, and the things that we're trying to do and bring about on a progressive basis around being convenient, affordable, accessible, simple, value for money. And we can add other words to that as well. I mean, one of the key things in Metrolink is, as members I think will be aware, that the system in an operational sense has to break even. So we're doing this in the context of quite a challenging environment to bring about simplicity, for example, and affordability, but in the context of a system that has to stand alone and doesn't get operational subsidy. So that's a challenge. I think it's an opportunity, but these are the sort of guiding principles and the tests that we apply when we're doing various ticketing initiatives. We go back to these. They're a bit subjective, of course, as to whether something really is simple or not, but they're really good things to hold firm to, working with Danny in terms of Metrolink and more widely across the organisation. Next, I'm just going to ask that Helen runs through, and I know you've got those slides in your pack. I've clicked it for you, I think. Yeah. A little bit about some of the recent things that we've been doing, not going back that long, and brings you right up to date with what we're currently working on.
Okay, hello. So I'm just going to touch on really the three major things that took place last year. So we go right back just over a year ago now to January 19, when we saw quite a significant change across the Metrolink network, when we removed the old point-to-point system, which was quite complicated for customers needing to plan considerably in advance, to the much more simple four-zone structure that all will be familiar with. That was a real major change for us to do across the network, made things a lot more flexible and better value with the zonal-based tickets. You may remember there was a lot of customer support and effort given to help customers at the time, with everybody quite brightly dressed with bobble hats on, supporting customers on the move up to launch, and certainly during those early few days. And that seemingly was very well received, and that support was welcomed. The key thing, of course, around that is that it doesn't stand still, and that was the real important basis for what we did slightly later on in the year. Where you may remember back in July when we launched contactless across Metrolink also. The important thing to note here is not contactless just as a retail channel, but actually the first time we've been able to introduce that daily cap, so the ability for a customer to touch in and touch out, not plan in advance and then be charged the right fare at the end of the day. Again, avoiding them having to plan in advance, but a daily cap at a zonal level. So, it wasn't a case of people being charged a full cap for full zone, but actually for the zones that they've travelled through. And again, that's been very well received. I think I do have some stats here. So just to touch on those, so obviously back in July, so we've had 380,000 individual customers that have used that scheme since then. It is what we termed a sort of a minimum viable product at the time. We wanted to make sure it got there and it was right, that it was secure and that customers were happy with it, and then we can evolve it from there on. Nearly 2 million journeys so far. I think we talk about 1.8, but obviously it's growing all the time. And I think one of the key things as well is the new insight across the network that it's given us. We've always, we are aware of product sales and so forth across all the channels, but what we are now building up is much more of an understanding of the journeys that customers make, the frequency of those, and that will in turn, as we build that, help in terms of network planning, going back to the things that Danny has been discussing just before. So that was July. We then soon move on to another big change across transport, and as you'll all be aware, was the introduction of our pass. So I think that the key thing here is that we believe that the cost of travel is a real barrier for young people, and our pass introduced that free travel for 16 to 18-year-olds. There was no time or day restrictions, so the idea obviously being that the young people could not just get to education and so forth, but also open up to a wealth of other opportunities. So yes, this was about bus travel and getting people out and about, but also introducing people to new opportunities. At any one time, there's approximately 60,000 eligible young people. It's obviously a trial at the moment. There's upwards of 38,000 cards in circulation, so being highly used, and I think there's upwards of 6 million bus journeys that have taken place since September last year on the network using those cards. There's obviously a lot of focus also on the opportunities themselves, and effort is always ongoing to bring new opportunities on board and make those available for the young people. And indeed, effort will soon turn towards the next eligible group. So as we move towards September, the next year of students will come on board, and we'll be able to offer them the same scheme. So a busy year.
Yeah, so our pass, as I say, is an example of where we're not just doing things in a Metrolink space, but very much trying to join things together and provide better access to the network. Obviously, not for an end in its own right, but linked to our wider ambitions for GM and linked, therefore, to other parts of the combined authority as well in terms of how we're thinking through these. So bringing us right up to date and very well timed this meeting, although it actually seems a long time ago. It was actually only last weekend. I was saying to Helen walking over here that we brought into play what we've called an early bird ticket, which is in a sense reinstating something that we piloted, as I think many members will be aware, just over a year ago. We dipped our toe in the water and I suppose took an element of risk there, and have come back now to introduce what is actually a revised. It's a different approach to pre-peak ticketing. And linked to some of the debates we've had today about such as making the best use of available capacity on the tram system that's available, obviously then linked to things such as congestion on the road network and indeed air quality, really good reasons, some of them there, to try to move some of the demand that's there and generate more demand when we say pre-peak, before 7 o'clock in the morning. So we've simplified this to be that you need to touch in paying contactless at one of the platform validators before 7 a.m. And actually, this is linked to the capping that Helen talked about earlier. So keeping it really simple, trying to make better use of that capacity and off-peak ticketing before 7 o'clock in the morning. And we're hoping now that this is something that we have introduced on a permanent basis. We did the pilot before, we've changed that approach, but it's certainly hoped to be part of that long-term landscape for ticketing. We may in future introduce different ways of paying for that. Part of what I think we're quite keen to get across today is to be, I suppose, a bit fleet of foot about this and evolve it. This is a technological space where we've got a sort of a long-term goal around some of those big words that we said at the beginning, but then to be able to adapt things quite quickly with emerging technology as well. So Early Bird introduced early this week. I mean, I think, quite frankly, it's too soon to say anything particularly dramatic about that. We've started to look at it, and we'll be producing regular twice-weekly updates, actually, internally within TFGM as to the uptake from that. And indeed, the way it's being promoted at stop and via radio adverts and so on is only really now clicking in and starting. But I think it's timely to come here today and talk about something that's just literally been introduced in the last week. But I think I heard Helen use the word busy as well, and if we just put up a slide there, which if ever one slide with 4 initiatives is a bit of an undersell, really. There's a tremendous amount of other things as well, which the ticketing team is involved with. I suppose we're relatively unusual in UK transport authorities because primarily of Metrolink in having an in-house ticketing team and being as active as we are. Just highlighting here a number of the things, be they Metrolink or indeed more generally, that are happening in that ticketing space. As I say, with the time available, they're just a bit of a brief mention, really. But one of them, and certainly one of the higher profile ones that's at the top of that list there, is the introduction of the £10 charge for the add-on, as we've called it, for tram and train, which obviously you'll be aware of. The take-up for that as of overnight and into this morning stands at around about 120,000 sales of that ticket, of that add-on. Clearly, it's something which, in a sense, can be contentious. It's something that we've felt we needed to do. We took to the combined authority and talked through the arrangements for it last year. But our role then is to get on and implement that and to communicate that. And we're part way through doing that, really. The fact that there's 120,000 people have bought that now, well, okay, but what about people that haven't yet done so, that are wanting to travel off-peak by tram and train? Remember, that doesn't in any way change the validity for the free bus pass concession. So that's something which we're doing and monitoring, as you can see, on a daily basis there in terms of the uptake of that and working quite hard on it. The remaining little bullet points there are other things that are pretty major initiatives that we said keep us busy in terms of extending the so-called WASPI travel scheme, and that there's a point there about us doing more of that and bringing that up to date for women born up to November 1955, and that's been a key mayoral undertaking, as you'll probably be aware. Also linked in terms of ticketing initiatives and things that we're actively doing is part of, as it says here, the wider Care Leavers Covenant, and in conjunction with partners such as the Prince's Trust, extending what is still a pilot. And I'm quite keen that where we can, we do pilots. We, I suppose, dip our toe in the water and do things and see what reaction we get, because some of this, going back to things such as the revenue risk on Metrolink, means that we do need to be careful, but actually try things, and I suppose be bold where we can to try them and then come back and look about them on a longer term basis. And the Care Leavers pilot there, 3 boroughs particularly, is the current, a really current example of that. The fourth point at the bottom, looking at more flexible ticketing options actively under development. I suppose it's a bit cryptic. I mean, we're at pretty advanced stage now of looking at a ticket which is about more flexible use. You know, so many people don't necessarily want a season ticket. They don't get best value out of necessarily a day ticket. So we, as I say, in hopefully the latter stages of developing a ticket which is about flexibility, about part-time workers, for example. All of that has to be part of what we think about. It's not just about a commercial offer for example, annual season ticket holders. How do we ensure, going back to those words at the beginning about the likes of inclusivity and accessibility, that we do bring about different and exciting options? And that's an example of one that we're currently in the final stages of developing and hope to be able to announce pretty soon. Beyond that, what I'm not doing today, and conscious I'm not doing, is putting up a detailed roadmap that takes us 1, 2, 3 years into the future. Some of that in terms of working with operators and operators of other modes, particularly through the GMTL joint ticketing company, of which we're a participant, is really important that we're able to push things forward with bus and indeed rail, maybe including bikes in the future as well. So we have got a roadmap, but need to be quite, as I said earlier, flexible and a bit fleet of foot about this. Technology, things such as contactless do change, Only recently, in the last couple of months in London, they've actually introduced there an approach whereby you don't actually have to activate your phone to use it in a contactless way. You're able to preload that in a wallet and then just put your phone to the validator. Now, that's a really good example. We're in touch with TfL about that as well, and the suppliers. You can roadmap this to an extent, but some of that is talking more widely, as it says there, in close collaboration with other transport operators and city regions about what they're doing, and trying to piggyback on the back of some of that and take advantage of some opportunities around that as well. We still do quite a lot to put there about retail channels. We sell quite a lot of these things increasingly through online and the app, but there are opportunities such as the app coming up for re-procurement, so how can we do that differently and better? And travel shops still play a really important place in this landscape. The £10 add-on charge that I described earlier, the vast majority of those have been issued through the TFGM travel shops. So the way in which we retail the channels is the word we've used there, the customer offer, is something we need to keep under review, and there isn't a sort of a one-size-fits-all. We've got to be, I think, quite adaptable about that. So we'd try and keep it really brief, so that there was time for questions, and to hand back to you, Chair.
Do you want to come in?
Yep, just a quick point in relation to point of clarification. The Combined Authority budget approved last week the extension of WASPI. That's April 1955, the date of birth, rather than November. Okay. Just members may be aware of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, questions? I've got Phil.
Cheers, thanks, Chair. It's a very good, detailed report. Thanks for sharing it with us. Just a couple of questions. It's been great the last couple of weeks where we've had the combined ticket in Rochdale, from Rochdale train station to the town centre. Hopefully that could be your next project in doing it permanent instead of just on a temporary basis. I know I asked Danny at the last meeting with Chris Jackson while we had him here, and I think he's both near enough in favour of making it like similar to the central zone ticket in central Manchester. And it would work really well in Rochdale if we could push that forward. On another matter, we have a lot of families using the tram in Rochdale, and one of the things to talk about is when you've got young children with you, trying to get to a machine when there's quite a lot of people there and the kids playing up, it's hard to get family tickets. Is there any suggestion or any idea if you'll be introducing family tickets on your phones?
I was saying to Helen coming across, we haven't even mentioned the Dippy ticket offer for Rochdale, so thank you for picking that up. I think it's a really good example of one that we're genuinely piloting at the present time. We've been aware of the interest and profile of that from Rochdale councillors, both officers and members, for some time, and I think what it did was give us a reason to do that pilot. And I mentioned a few minutes ago doing pilots wherever we can, and seeing then what reaction. You can't model some of this. It hasn't necessarily been done. So we're going to be watching that with interest and seeing what we can do. So, and we're certainly very well aware of the interest and enthusiasm to make it more permanent. Let's see what happens over the next few months. I don't know whether you wanted to pick up family tickets, Helen?
So particularly with regards to the phones, I think there's a piece of work that's underway at the moment to look at what we can do in terms of the mobile piece. Obviously, you know, there's a lot of interest in that, but we also need to be quite mindful of the fare evasion piece that is prone to, but it is actively being looked at as part of that new procurement, and including that the products that will be available on that. So whilst there isn't a decision yet, it is actively being looked at.
Okay. I've got David first.
Thank you, Chair. It was just to go back onto the £10 charge. Obviously, from my perspective, some people may disagree, but the way I phrase it to people is that you pay for 1 week, get 51 free, effectively. But I think there's still some concern in sort of within Greater Manchester that they're having to pay £10 to get the bus. Now we know that isn't the case, but there still does seem to be a belief that that's the case. I mean, I think there was a story in the MEN just the other day, and the headline sort of suggested that. I just think we need to do more work on making it clear that you're still getting the bus. This is an add-on. That's the first thing. And secondly, I did raise this last time as well. Obviously, with it including tram and train, is there any capacity to allow those to pay the extra £10 to do this at train stations, whether it's those that are managed locally, currently by Northern, or any that we manage ourselves. Because obviously, I think in the case in Stockport, it can be quite tricky to get to the travel shop. There's still maybe a bit of work to do as well in terms of explaining to people what PayPoint is, because some people still don't use PayPoint or don't know what it is. So is there any capacity there, again, just to potentially see if we can activate the cards at train stations, and also, again, push out the point about what PayPoint is as well? Thank you.
So the reality of the train stations is a technical limitation. In the future, as we look more towards integrated ticketing, it's certainly something that we'd want to solve, but at the moment it is a technical restriction. Acknowledging, though, the point about making sure the message is getting out there, and the detail of that, we've revisited that messaging again. There's more radio adverts, there's more press, and we are trying to push out the point. And really try and explain to customers we're attending quite a lot of network events for that target audience, and also making sure that there are people at local railway stations. So the messaging is continually evolving, and we are doing our best to reach the customer group.
Yeah, Nathan?
Thank you, Chair. I think I'd like to commend the contactless. I have found phenomenal, really good, and I think you do an amazing amount of work, and perhaps it isn't something for your ticketing, but I've been asking for 12 months with respect to our pass for what success and what failure looks like. We're on a 24-month pilot. It's cost us £15 million. We've just been told there's 38,000 people registered, so it's costing £394 a head, and yet 12 months in, after the Mayor committing to give me a metric of what good and what failure looks like, nothing's been produced. Do we actually know what success or failure looks like for the RPAS yet?
Just in response to that, I've just commissioned an independent review of our pass, which will look at a whole range of metrics in terms of its performance, both as a transport card and as a deliverer of opportunities to young people. So that evaluation will be coming back to the Mayor and to the CA, and will come to you as well.
And the Mayor's here at the next meeting as well, so.
So I really appreciate that, but it's sort of cart and horse, really. So we had no idea before we committed 15 million really what we wanted from it. And then this plays into the 180 million we're going to want for franchising. That we don't set out, before we set out on the journey, what we want to deliver for the money. And it really does concern me. We have good ideas, or what seem to be good ideas, but we don't hang anything on them. So that's all I would ask, that can we, as we move forward with both this and franchising, we hang some target on it, other than, it seems like a good idea.
The Mayor will answer that next month. We'll leave it to Andy. Okay, I've got Sean first, please.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks for the presentation. I want to echo Councillor Evans' comments about contactless on the tram. I think it's brilliant. I use it quite frequently. And it's great that a number of our bus operators have got contactless on board their buses now too. I know that we don't have control over the fares structure on buses yet. Perhaps, maybe we will, maybe we won't. But it's just an observation about some of the ticketing offers that are available to people who download apps of particular operators on their phones. I don't think you can answer this, but maybe the operators who do this can. For example, Go North Western First, you can buy like batches of a certain number of single journeys, and it works out at £2 each for some of it. I really do think that in the light of some of the conversations about services being withdrawn before, about how some people use them socially and not for commuting as occasional bus users, if that kind of service where you could just tap on and off for a single fare for £2 were extended for people to be able to do that with the debit card on board the bus, I think that would make occasional bus users, makes bus services more attractive to occasional and social users, and also potentially speed up boarding and efficiency. So it's just an observation on the success of contactless, what is currently on offer on bus operators' apps, and perhaps a suggestion that some of them could take up, because I would assume that the saving that they make from people not paying cash on buses and using the app instead is the same as a saving that would make if they were just to tap on the bus and they didn't have to handle the cash from that either. Would
any of the operators like to come in on that?
Yeah, and through GMCA, we're looking at doing multi-operator mobile ticketing as well, so that's some work that we've got on at the moment. In terms of tap on, tap off on bus, it is something that is technically possible. I suppose it's just what the fares are. Will any increase in ridership offset any lost revenue and that sort of thing? So it is a lot of work, and given the uncertainty in the market just at this moment in time, is it something that we want to do? Maybe in a month's time it might be something we start looking at.
Yeah. Can you use mic, please? Sorry.
Just to say that the Go Ahead group first rolled out tap on, tap off in Brighton and are now rolling it across the UK. So it's coming to Manchester.
Brilliant, thank you. Good positive response. Anybody else? No? Okay. Thank you. I've got Steve.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a quick question that was raised with me a little while ago by some residents who use the pensioner passes, and that they obviously themselves don't obviously, because they have the pensioner pass on the trams, they don't obviously need to pay for that service. But the problem seems to be they hadn't realised apparently that with the contactless system that when they kept cards in the same wallet, that they were then getting debited against those there. So is there any way we can actually get some publicity or some sort of warnings to people about keeping these cards separate? Because I think one person told me, said they had 2 cards in their wallet which were next to their pass, and it was debited up on them. So I don't know whether, I'm assuming that the software can't sort out that sort of problem, but obviously whether there's some sort of warnings we can actually do to people to actually be mindful of this, because it caught these people out of really out of the blue, and obviously it's something that might catch others if they're not aware of it as well. Thank you.
It's a valid point. In fact, I was only talking to TfL about this very issue yesterday. We did put out comms around this at the outset, and we are looking at it again. I think it is a valid issue. We haven't necessarily had an awful lot of input through our contact centre, but I am aware of other feedback that has suggested it needs to be looked at, and certainly the next set of comms will include that. I am very mindful of the whole car clash. Technically, you're right, we can't avoid it, but again, we need to make sure that customers are getting that message.
Okay, I've got Matt.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just on the RPass initiative, I think it's been a great success. I've spoke to young people in our borough who it's helped out a lot, especially in college students now, young people without EMA, so they were without 30 quid a month there. Minimum wage has gone up by 80 pence for 16 to 18-year-olds over the last 10 years, so they're out of pocket. The apprentice wage is £3.90, so it has been a big helping hand for young people across Greater Manchester, and I think it's one of the great successes of Mr Burnham's tenure so far. There should be more uptake, I do agree, but it's important that it just keeps getting pushed out there. But it has been a big helping hand for young people from speaking to them, especially our college students as well. In terms of the buses and what Councillor Fielding was saying about how we look at contactless payments and whatnot. I mean, Manchester Community Transport are going under. They didn't take contactless car payments. I mean, on a few occasions when I wanted to get on the 44 service with MCT, I didn't have any cash on me. I just expected it was a norm that all buses in GM had contactless, so I couldn't get it. It had to go, and how many people has that happened to? So maybe that had a hand. I mean, there's so many complex factors at play with it, but we need that should be the base level, and I know we're working towards it. And also the future for bus transport in Greater Manchester, this arbitrary, haggling and bartering that goes on the buses every day needs to go. I mean, it's adding so many delays. I mean, to get me there pass. I mean, I get on the bus and I say, right, I can have a day ticket with Stagecoach. The driver takes it off, puts that on there, take the ticket out, then he has to key in and put it on the Get Me There card. It's nearly a 30-second transaction, and that, multiplying all the passengers that get on it, it's an absolute nightmare. So if we want to make any progress, and it's got to go, and I know a lot of work's been going on behind the scenes, and just as well on ticketing, you know, the prices of our annual fares are far too high for working class people, but I know we have to break even, but it's very frustrating stuff, but I know a lot of work's been going on behind the scenes, so I do commend it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So I'm going to move on now to item 11, social value. Got Kate?
Yeah, thanks. So this is the first of 2 reports on areas of policy that have been of particular interest to members over the last couple of years. This report on social value follows on from a report that the previous committee considered in February 2019. That was very much focused around social value in the capital programme. However, as members will be aware, social value is considerably wider than that, and that's what we've sought to bring out in this report. Should just say, obviously, that good accessible transport which supports people and places is at the heart of what we do at TFGM and is at the centre of the 2040 strategy. What we've tried to set out here is how transport and TFGM are supporting those wider objectives for the city region. Greater Manchester has been at the forefront of this important agenda for a number of years. So what you've got here is a flavour of the breadth of activity and initiatives across the 6 key policy areas in the Greater Manchester Combined Authorities framework, of which TFGM's a signatory. So this includes a range of different initiatives around access to employment, apprenticeships, and Councillor Dickinson referred to that before, project delivery and use of assets for community benefit. So we've put some real tangible examples of some of the work that we do around wider social value. There is always obviously more that we can do in this area. It's certainly not static, so we'd very much welcome any comments that members might have just around different ideas and initiatives as well. Thanks.
Anybody like to ask any questions? Angelika?
Thank you, Chair. We all want Transport for Greater Manchester to be, I think, at the forefront of progressive procurement policy and practice, and I am very, very pleased and welcome this report, which has a number of really, really good examples on how you are delivering on that and how you are delivering on the different priorities that we have got. I wanted to ask 2 questions. Are you thinking about a refresh on this policy? I believe that the weighting currently is 10%. In Manchester City Council, our weighting is 20%. And we carried out a specific piece of work in the Highways Directorate on the back of responding to catastrophic climate change. We have put out 2 infrastructure tenders that include an added 10% weighting just to look at environmental sort of elements and what the contractors can do in this area to respond to climate change, but also to support with the challenge that we've got tackling air pollution. And we have had some really, really good responses. Secondly, are you all right, in terms of a recommendation, I would really like to see a bit more comprehensive information that gives us a picture of the collective impact in terms of the social value that we are getting from all of the, if you like, Transport for Greater Manchester budget. And this is something that Greater Manchester Combined Authority does in their own procurement, and we also do it in Manchester City Council. I've got just an example here for you. So we have commissioned our top 300 suppliers, and we have examined our spend in terms of social value. And we do it by value or by contract spend. So we've got cumulative figures, for example, on apprenticeships. You mentioned here, just picking on apprenticeships, you've got 4 in one project, 22 on the CAM project. You've got 40 internally, so it would be really good if kind of like you can bring it all together, and we are very happy to work with you to tell you how we did this piece of work. Thank you.
Yeah, that'd be really helpful, thanks. And of course, yeah, completely understand the point around cumulative impact and what it looks like across the board. In relation to the sort of refresh around policy, I think it's fair to say this committee considered a report last time around climate emergency, carbon budgets, etc. And certainly we've commissioned a rapid piece of work to be able to embed how we as TFGM working with partners can ensure that we're meeting that agenda, including through procurement and through projects. So that's something, a piece of work that's going on at the moment. I think you mentioned, Councillor Stoyer, about a report back on that early in the new municipal year. And the same goes in relation to frameworks. We do work quite closely with the Combined Authority, so making sure that we're aligning our policies so that Greater Manchester as a family is consistent around that is something that we keep under constant review.
Sean?
Yeah, it's a point about the alignment of policy with the Combined Authority. I went to the launch of the Greater Manchester Good Employment Charter, which was something that's been spearheaded by the Mayor, and it was great to be able to present the certification and the plaques to the various organisations that have reached accredited status as part of that. I think that the report on social value in the context of TFGM needs to make reference to the Employment Charter so that we know we're saying the same thing right across all of the public sector in Greater Manchester. I mean, just on that, you know, we procure tender bus services. There was a firm that we continue to procure services from who was fined a few years ago now, but for non-payment of pensions, they failed to comply with the auto-enrolment laws. I also know that the starting hourly rate of many of drivers of many of our bus operators continues to be below the living wage. I suspect that their cleaners and their fueler shunters and other people that are employed in those companies is even lower than that. So I do think that we should be using both the Good Employment Charter and any levers that we've got to reward those companies that pay people a wage that they can live on, and practice good employment practice elsewhere as well. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the report does refer to a contract that's currently being procured by Keolis Amy in relation to security, which that has been embedded in. I think we probably just assumed that the Good Employment Charter was a given, so that's maybe the reason why it wasn't referenced, but I take your point around showing the value of some of this and the consistent approach across GM.
Okay, I've got Peter.
Thanks, Chair. Pages 6 and 7, Community Rail Group groups. I did mention this at the last meeting. Quite a few years ago now, this body said we'd give a prize to Greater Manchester, in Greater Manchester Transport's name, for best stations. And you said you'd come back to me. But, you know, it's brilliant that it's being highlighted in this report. We really should reward these people.
Okay, thanks for that. Steve?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it's on the report, page 6, where we're talking about the range of community groups and the supporting employees in their voluntary and charitable endeavours. That's 2.26 on page 6. It's obviously some really good, great work that's going on there. But I'm also wondering in what respect are we in any way sort of helping to support those groups and employees by actually perhaps giving them a little bit of time off work during the year? Because I know some organisations do. I can see you nodding, so I'll await your reply.
Yeah, that's part of our corporate volunteering policy. We also look to areas where the business can support and align. So, for example, I met with the Transport Museum. We're meeting continually with heritage colleagues, so where we can use our technical skills as well and support groups of staff with different opportunities out in different parts of Greater Manchester. So, yeah, I mean, it's working quite well at the moment.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to move on now to item 12. Age-friendly transport. We've got James.
Very quickly. Just very quickly to introduce, and then James, who's been leading on the work, is going to bring out a couple of examples. Obviously, we know transport's a critical part of healthy ageing, keeping people active and connected. This is a further update again from a report that the previous committee considered last March around the activity we're undertaking in support of age-friendly transport. We do work closely again with the CA, and the lead for ageing for Greater Manchester is Councillor Brenda Warrington as the leader of Tameside. The committee has taken a keen interest in helping to shape this agenda as it relates to transport. There's a range of activity again set out across the pillars that are listed in 1.2 about how we support the different ways that people get around, so by rail, by bus, by foot or bike, as well as some of the safer driving pieces. I think James was just going to highlight a couple of bits.
Thank you. So 3 of the areas that I'd just like to highlight are the community transport. We've had a big focus on how we can promote some of the excellent voluntary lift services that exist. We're looking at how we can identify good practice and good models that can be expanded so we can increase that provision, because these schemes, provide some really important trips for older people to make sure they can attend medical appointments, meet with friends and get to the shops. And many of these services, they also have a wraparound service. They provide befriending service, social events and cultural trips, and that's a really important part of the GM ageing strategy, which is about enriching older lives and not just about keeping people out of hospital or out of the social care system. We've got the city centre pedestrian crossings trial, where we've retimed the number of signals in the city centre, and that's about reducing the time that pedestrians have to wait to cross, and also increasing the green man time so that people have longer to cross, and that's being identified as a particular obstacle for older people. And so the initial findings have been really positive from that trial, and it'll help us to understand how we can improve timings for pedestrians whilst also minimising the impact on road traffic, and can inform reviews elsewhere in Greater Manchester. And finally, I think something we discussed at previous committees is the support for older drivers. The Driving Safe for Longer courses continue to run, and we've been promoting those more widely. But we're now looking to organise a large seminar in April to offer training and advice to older drivers, but it will have a strong emphasis on also encouraging older people to think about using public transport or cycling and walking alternatives to driving, so that they're better prepared in the event that they need to give up driving in future. Thank you.
Thank you. Has anybody got any questions on this? I've got Steve.
Thank you, Chair. A couple of quick points if I may. I mean, obviously, a lot of older people do actually use smartphones and other technology, but obviously equally quite a lot don't as well. So obviously, given the way we're moving on, it's actually how we can communicate information to these people and get, obviously, whereas younger people are actually into it all the time, and there's probably apps that even I don't know about, and there'll be even more in the future, but obviously they aren't going to be suitable for obviously people unless you have smartphones and have that technology available. So wondering how we keep older people in tabs with them. Not necessarily older people. Sometimes they can, I know some younger people who simply can't afford these devices in some of their estates. And so I think it's actually getting that information. So do you know they're available? Second quick one as well, on Metrolink stations generally. I know sometimes you're going down and you're going to get your tickets or what have you, and you hear the speakers going off, and you cannot, for the life of you, actually understand what they're saying. So, I mean, particularly as you get a bit older, it's getting harder and harder, particularly people that might be hard of hearing. And although there might be older, also some younger people can be affected by it as well. So I know we have some interactive signs on Metrolink stations and indeed on roads as well, where they have put some very interesting comments on those roadside signs. So if we, in any way we could look at in the future, maybe putting important information on those Metrolink stations. I mean, what you don't want to go along getting your ticket and you suddenly find out the trams have been delayed or stopped, and there's no trams on that particular section of the line. So it'd be really helpful if we were saying stop you buying a ticket if you know there's nothing coming. But generally, it's all sort of important information. If we can get that available, particularly to older people, I think it'd really assist. Thank you.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think in relation to your first point, it's absolutely spot on about engagement. Different communities have different needs in terms of the channels that we use. We know there's a number of people that haven't got access to digital services, and your point was well made in relation to people not necessarily being able to afford smartphones. We do work quite closely with the 10 councils and their access and their community groups as well, so that really gives us a lot of channels and with the VCS to be able to push messages out. In relation to the announcements, I think I'd take that away. I know that there is information that is put up on the signs at stations, but we have got our disability reference group, DDRG, just in relation to accessibility, so I'll take that back to them.
Okay, Phil?
Chair, just in case I've missed it, in relation to people going for hospital appointments and doctor's appointments in the daytime, that's well and good, but early in the morning you get a lot of elderly people trying to get to appointments where they can't use the cards before 9:30. Is that what time does the services start in the daytime, in the early morning?
From the voluntary lift schemes, it differs from scheme to scheme, but I think a lot of them are actually focused on connecting for medical appointments. So I'd imagine that they would start early in the morning to make sure that people can get to those early morning appointments.
Just on that, I thought we were doing some information where we were speaking to the hospitals, etc., to make those appointments slightly later. And if so, have we had any successes in it?
No, not to date. I think it's it's a really complicated area, but it's something we're talking to the health service about, and a couple of trusts who we're looking to see if they can offer older people more flexibility with appointments, so that if they're reliant on their concessionary pass to get to that appointment, they could perhaps have one later in the day if that's medically appropriate, so they can use their pass to get there.
Okay, has anybody got? Oh. Thank you. Yeah, Angie?
Thank you, Chair. About the voluntary transport, do you have a relationship with schemes in other counties such as East Cheshire? It's just that some of our some patients in Stockport area have to go over to Macclesfield Hospital, and I assume that, I mean, I don't know if they run a scheme, and the fact that the person lives in Greater Manchester but is crossing the border, how does that work?
I mean, we've been focusing on schemes that operate predominantly in GM, but we've also been in touch with Glossop Community Transport Organisation, who obviously do cross-border trips. We've created a community transport forum so we can get these organisations to talk more and share good practice, and also to talk to us more. But yes, we'll certainly look at what else exists on the borders of GM and bring those into the fold as well.
Great. Anybody got any more questions? Matt?
It's just a comment, Chair, if we're moving to comments already. I just thought it'd be prudent to just make, I don't know how well advertised it is, but I know the National Walking Summit, the 2020 National Walking Summit is here on the Friday the 6th of March at Friends Meeting House. I don't know how well advertised it is, but I don't know if any members of the committee are quite interested in this area of work. It might be good to attend. I know I'm coming down, so I just thought I'd just point that out. Cheers.
Good point, that, Matt. Take Angeliki and then we'll move on.
Thank you. I've got a number of comments, so please do bear with me. I was quite disappointed to start reading the report because it started with community transport, and I think that it is very, very important to acknowledge that this is over and above the main offer that we should be offering everyone, and I think that it would be doing injustice to older people if we didn't acknowledge how cuts to mainstream bus services, poor quality bus services, have left many people, older people living in Manchester, feeling abandoned, feeling at the risk of social exclusion, and also loneliness. So I think it's important to start with that. Secondly, with regards to the research that you are looking at and you have commissioned, I think I've got another piece of research to offer you. There is a new report from the social scientists and architects, which is linked to the Manchester Urban Ageing Research Group, which is titled Developing Age-Friendly Communities in the Northern Gateway Urban Regeneration Project. I would really like for you to take that and have a good look at it, because I think it has got some really good insight to offer in terms of how people experience walking to get to where they need to go to, i.e. amenities, district centres, bus stations and Metrolink stations and everywhere, and hospitals that you have sort of already mentioned. So the other thing that I wanted to say is in order to really get older people out of cars, and you have said that, there's lots of people that go to these sort of coffee mornings and other social facilities available for older people. They do rely on volunteers, and it is usually younger older people that are sort of these volunteers, and they offer lifts to each other. So older people, in order to get out of their cars, then we need to make it easier for people to walk, to get to the bus stop, to go to the Metrolink stop. And I have never seen a single bench funded from TFGM in order to help them on these trips. There's some really sort of easy wins that we can have in this agenda. They need places to rest, they need proximity to amenities, and this is something referred to in this report, but also they need buses to take them where they need to go to. With regards to the city centre pedestrian trial, I really welcome this. I wonder though, why did you start from the city centre? The city centre has got, I think, the smallest population of older people, although increasingly has got older people. I think the easiest thing that we can all perhaps agree to do is to extend this trial now to other signals across the city in order to be able to help people to walk and go to their local parks, to walk and go to the sort of local shops. It is only increasing the pedestrian lights for a couple of seconds. That is not going to have a major impact on the community route network, and if it really kind of like slightly does, I mean, I would prefer to support pedestrians, all sorts of pedestrians, older people, and look at it from a health and safety perspective rather than causing someone to a little bit of inconvenience because the traffic light stays open on for a little while longer. So the other thing that I wanted to say with regards to this report is we are confusing, I think, slightly older people with the point around disability. I think that I'm not that old, but you know, as I get older, I get slower. I am not disabled, and looking at some people that I speak to, older people, they're not disabled. They're just a little bit slower. And then they might have other challenges. I think that the disability group, disability issues, deserve a report on their own, and we shouldn't be confusing those two sort of issues together. Thank you.
Just to come in on that, did we connect up with Age UK? Because over on the Wigan side of things, I know they contacted us because they helped to obviously run a charity connected with people with dementia to help and support them. But they did come to us and asked us, because they got some money from the government that was asking that, you know, where were you accessing transport, etc. And they was putting benches in certain places, whether that was accessing transport or recreation areas, for instance. And I just wondered whether that was a GM-wide scheme or what funding they had towards it. But if not, we need to connect up to that, if that's okay.
Sure, yeah, will do. Yeah, apologies, Councillor Sawyer. The disability, the DDRG that we have looks at accessibility issues in the widest sense, so it's an absolute point well made, which is services that are accessible to everybody that uses them in Greater Manchester. And we can certainly look at bringing something back specifically in relation to disability. In relation to the city centre pedestrian trial, it references at 4.5 around the fact that it's kind of a proof of concept in small areas and recognising the fact that the city centre is quite unique in relation to how people interact with it. And so we're hoping to be able to use that piece of work to be able to inform further studies as and when funding allows.
Okay. Anybody got any other questions? Otherwise, I'll move on. Mark, quick.
Yeah, just a quick one. One thing that hasn't been mentioned is to do with pavement parking. I know it's going to the Transport Select Committee in the next couple of months, I believe, but it just seems to have gone into nothingness. I know there's been a lot of political turmoil, so I don't know if TFGM can get an update or maybe put some pressure on them to get an answer, because every day that the pavement parking situation isn't sorted out in GM is another day that you know, elderly people are struggling to get down paths. It's definitely my biggest bugbear, and it adds to isolation and stress for a lot of people. I don't know if you have an update on it, Kate.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, obviously it's a matter for highways authorities in relation to pavement parking, so we do work closely with the officers across the 10 councils in relation to pavement parking issues, what can be done in the absence of any legislation. I think you may have heard Chris Boardman advocate quite strongly for action around pavement parking, and you've referenced the Select Committee report as well, so we'll continue to work with officers around what that looks like. Obviously issues around enforcement has been something that's been raised with us as a particular issue.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 13, can we agree the exclusion of the press and public? Thank you.